Next question. Jocko, what is the number one philosophical lesson that you've learned from jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. So jiu-jitsu emphasizes so much of what I believe that it's tough to narrow down, but I will. But I will throw some things out there that kind of are part of jiu-jitsu and are part of what I believe. First of all, what we just talked about, being indirect and indirect attacks, flanking, that's what you have to do in jiu-jitsu. You have to set things up. You have to detach. You have to detach from the chaos and from the emotional. You cannot get emotional on the mat. Attack the flanks. You got to hit people where they aren't expecting it. You got to have a plan, but you got to be ready to adapt. You got to constantly improve your position. You got to have fun while you're doing it. You got to practice being in bad situations. You got to make your training as realistic as possible, right? These are all things. I talk about these in all aspects of combat and in business and in life. You got to be physically fit so your mind stays sharp. That's true in jiu-jitsu. It's true in combat. It's true in life. You got to know when to tap. Right? You got to know when to tap. You got to know when to give up on a single battle so that you don't lose the whole war. Got to train for worst case scenarios. You got to start with that person on your back. Got to start with the person with you in an arm lock. And training for combat, you got to train for those worst case scenarios where you're outnumbered. You got a bunkered position and they're shooting paintball at you and you got down men. That's what you got to do. You got to train for the worst case scenarios. And same thing with business. I work with like sales groups sometimes, and they'll do role playing. And I'll say, be the worst customer you can possibly be. So that way when this person meets a normal human, they know how to knock it out of the park. Here's another one from jiu-jitsu. Basically, don't judge a book by its cover. Right? Because you don't know if the person that you're about to slap is Jeff Glover or is Dean Lister.
Or Joel Tudor.
You don't know what's going to happen. So don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, I mean, Dean, you'd be less apt to slap than you would Jeff Glover. I guess that's a good point.
Yeah, Dean, you can kind of judge by the cover.
Yeah, the cover is pretty evident. But Jeffy or Joel,
yeah,
those guys weigh 150 pounds. And they're, a surfer guy and a whatever Jeff is. I don't know what genre of human you put Jeff into. But you wouldn't think that he would throw a Darce choke on your face. So that's that. Prioritize and execute in the jiu-jitsu. I mean, we just talked about it 14 times tonight for combat. Talk about it in business all the time. You got to make sure that the initiatives that you're running, you don't have 38 initiatives. In jiu-jitsu, guess what? You hear this all the time. You're about to get choked. You got to protect your neck. Number one, you got to protect your neck.
Yeah.
Then you can worry about your leg, and then you can worry about your arm and the hooks and everything else. But you got to protect the neck. You got to prioritize.
Yeah.
You got to keep things simple. You got to create. You got to have an open mind. You got to be creative and look for different ways to win and different things to do. You got to make sure you don't get trapped in any ruts. Mentally trapped in a rut. This happens to me.
Everybody, I think.
Yeah, it happens to me, but I only know what I can tell you about me. And that is I get trapped in ruts with jiu-jitsu. Where I get stuck in something, and I'll just go with one move for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Got to be careful of that. I need to be better about that. Discipline equals freedom. So with jiu-jitsu, the more disciplined you are in training, the more freedom you have on the mat. So the more you train, the more you work, the more you drill, the more you can move, the more you can escape, the more you can create, the more you can finish.
Yeah. And not to mention the fear that it eliminates. Because, how, let's say you're not that disciplined, you take 2 weeks off. A lot of time when you come back from that 2 weeks, you have that added element of nervousness. Like, dang, am I going to gas or am I going to get, tapped out in front of everybody when maybe there was a higher expectation on me or something like that.
Yeah, no, I don't have that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's part of it, though, for sure.
But I would say the number one philosophical lesson, and I guess this is a philosophical lesson, is the same thing that I learned from combat, and that's humility. And jiu-jitsu is absolutely one of the most humbling experiences in the world. And I got people now that have started jiu-jitsu because of the podcast, and they say, oh, I just did my first jiu-jitsu class. Damn, that was humbling. Yep. It is extremely humbling. You're going to get beat. You're never going to know everything. You're always going to be learning that there's other ways to do things. And somebody that just started can come up with amazing techniques, and that's humbling. And there's other martial arts that have better moves that you need to pay attention to, like wrestling has better takedowns, like Sambo with the leg locks, and catch wrestling. Some of those things that are better moves, and you need to apply those. And guess what? You still need to know how to strike, because it can be hard to take people down. So you need to know how to strike, and you can't be cocky and you can't be overconfident, because the bottom line is in jiu-jitsu, you will get beat. And you will get beat by smaller guys, by weaker guys, by older guys. You're going to get beat. And there's somebody that's better than you. And if you don't like that, or if your ego doesn't like that, then you got to find a new game to play.
Yeah.
Because you need to find a softer game or an easier game, because jiu-jitsu is honest.
Yeah.
And you cannot escape that. And that's as it should be. And it's, of course, this philosophy is something that I definitely carried over to combat and carry over to when I talk to businesses and carry over to life. You can't be overconfident. You can't be overconfident. You're never going to think you know everything. You have to respect the enemy. That's part of humility. You got to respect if you're not humble, you don't respect your enemy. You don't respect your opponent. You don't respect your competitor. And if you don't, that's when you're going to get caught. So to me, humility is the most important thing that jiu-jitsu teaches you.
Yeah, and it's kind of it can be kind of not a trick. Yeah, I'm going to call it a trick, because you got to maintain the humility, right? But that humility will be tested if you stick with it. So, and I'll tell you a little quick story about that test being bestowed upon me. It was like a little after I got my purple belt. I really hit my stride. I was competing a lot and winning, and
you were training with me a lot back then.
Yes, that was right at that time when I was training with you, and you were, when I, if
there was a little bit of mentorship going on.
Yeah, a little bit.
Jiu-jitsu mentorship.
Yeah, that was the exact time.
Yeah,
and and I was like, yeah, and I started to kind of, give into my own hype, kind of like, oh, I'm the man. Not outwardly, but on the inside. And it was fun.
Jiu-jitsu man gets cocky on the inside.
On the inside, yeah. Exactly. And here's the thing. A lot of people, that's how. In fact, a little bit of that is good, because you get that confidence, that hunger to even learn more and be better. So I had that, and then Greg, I hadn't rolled with Greg since. I didn't know him as good, but I knew him, but not as good as I do now. And the last time I rolled with him, I was a white belt. Long time ago. Oh. And he just would destroy me. So I was like, Greg's like, oh yeah, hey, congratulations, you've been winning and stuff like that. I was like, oh yeah. He's like, all right, yeah, let's roll. So I'm like, all right, well, let me show what. He goes, yeah, I'm thinking in my mind, yeah, I've been winning here. Let me go ahead and show you my new stuff. I was going to show Greg in my own mind.
Yeah.
And bro, Greg took me like I was a white belt again, immediately. The kind where literally nothing I did worked and everything he did worked.
Yeah.
It was like, it's like he did a step 1, step 2, step 3, tap me out. Step 1, step 2, tap me out. And that was the time where I got put from like the top of the mountain in my own head right to the bottom of the mountain, literally to the bottom, not almost at the bottom, to the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah, it's actually so good when that happens. Yeah. And actually it's something I occasionally, jiu-jitsu is super humbling. Occasionally you get someone that is really, really good, and they don't come up against people all the time they don't come up against people very often that are better than them.
Yeah.
Most people in the beginning, you have several years of being beat down. But occasionally you get somebody that's a great wrestler, or maybe they were a judo player or something, so they come into the game, or they're just super strong, or they're just a freak athlete. And so they very quickly, in a matter of 6 months to a year, all of a sudden they're doing really well.
Yeah.
Sometimes those people mentally, they might be good at jiu-jitsu, but they don't mentally get it, and they become really bullies. And that's one of the. It doesn't happen that often, like I said, but it does occasionally happen where you get somebody that just is a dominant force. They don't get humbled enough,
right.
and they don't, because even if you don't actually get humbled, jiu-jitsu normally in the beginning you learn because one of the things I say to people is, I'm not, because I can tap you, it doesn't mean that I'm a better human than you. Right. It just means I train more jiu-jitsu than you.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's all it means. And that means that someone else is training jiu-jitsu more than me, and they can beat me, and that's just what it is. But sometimes people think that because they can tap somebody out, that they're better than them.
Yeah.
As a human.
Yeah, there is a superiority.
And that's not a good attitude to have. That's not what jiu-jitsu should be about.
Yeah, and those guys a lot of times, and this is just kind of one way to put it, they don't pay their dues, so to speak.
Right.
You know how like a normal
They
person,
don't get the humility lesson over and over and over again.
Exactly.
They get it like a few times, but then they overcome it quickly.
Yeah, and it outweighs that.
And it outweighs.
Yeah.
Yep. So you got to be careful of that. It's just be careful at. If you're a person that's naturally really adept at jiu-jitsu, make sure you're not turning into a bully.
Yeah. And a lot of times that can block you from learning.
Oh, it definitely blocks you from
learning. Because it's like, why would I start learning all this weirdo game? Like if you're a strong wrestler, like why would I start learning bottom game?
Yeah.
If when I'm killing with all this other stuff, I'm gonna listen to that.
Because there's someone that's a better wrestler than you.
Yeah,
that's why.
Or just knows the combination. Because a lot of times, certain guys they'll know the combo to beat wrestling.
Yeah.
Without having to do wrestling.
Yep.
Like some guys, they're just like that, So it's part of it.
Jiu-jitsu.